What if I told you that there's a guy out there whose entire mission in life is to never die?
Don't die is a credo for how we need to transition into the age of superintelligence.
What's the bigger picture with this don't die philosophy?
In the era of superintelligence, his philosophy extends not just in his physical sense, but also to every corner of society. His message isn't just about living longer, it's about living better, living smarter, transcending the limitations of our biological programming.
I mean, he's playing three-dimensional chess while we're kind of still trying to figure out checkers, right?
The foundational baseline is get sleep, eat very, very well, and exercise. And it's in that order, right? He prioritizes sleep first.
So I've got a question for you. You could take the red pill and die of natural causes, or you could take the blue pill and live another 250 years, maybe even longer, perhaps not even dying. Which one would you take? All right. People, welcome to Emergence Now. I'm your host, Darren. I'm joined by my ever-dashing co-host, Nikos. And today we're about to hit you with something that will flip the way you think about the biggest idea that exists. So Nikos recently attended a summit, and the summit has been moving all over the world. A week ago, it was in Singapore. So before we dive into that, I have a question for you. What if I told you that there's a guy out there whose entire mission in life is to never die? No, seriously, he's made it his number one goal. Not to scale a business, not to change the world in the traditional way, but to literally not die. His name is Bryan Johnson, and he's basically created a blueprint that Nikos is going to walk us through, where he's spending a couple of $1 million. Yeah, you heard that right. $2 million a year to reverse the aging process. And I mean, there's a lot of things to unpack here, but let's dive in. So, Neeks, you happened to be in San Francisco while this summit was going on.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I would consider the summit it was literally the first of the Don't Die Summit, and he had kicked off a bunch of these dinners, which I'll get into because he runs through this really amazing thought experiment of why he sets the stage with this pretty audacious premise of don't die. Don't die is essentially, like you had mentioned, a credo for how we need to transition into the age of superintelligence. And if we could all just agree on one thing, right? Because if you tilt that to the positive, and there's been some criticism around how he's phrased the movement, which is a whole other thing, but he's like, hey guys, if we could just agree on one thing moving forward, and he becomes kind of living embodiment of that credo, could we be more prepared to usher in superintelligence? And that one credo is essentially don't die. And so I'll go over the summit. We'll definitely dive into his protocols, but I'm fascinated by his philosophy as it kind of intersects with a lot of my research, my personal research and my professional research in AI. And I know we have another episode coming up because we're going to do kind of like a 1-2 punch. So it's going to get a little bit techie, a little bit nerdy, but for those of you that are interested in all of the things that we have kind of presented to you, through our many episodes, Don't Die, I would say, is probably one you should at least think about, right? Because it's super interesting. So, okay, let me summarize the summit. The summit, it's just this transformative exploration that is at the intersection of biohacking, longevity, and superintelligence. The keynote speech alone was really transformative, and by the time I got there, it was only like 6:30 in the morning, right? And we started off with this magnificent morning rave where he walks in and he immediately like takes his shirt off, right? Because he needs to be kind of like his own brand. So 46 years old, completely shredded, starts dancing, DJ music blasting. The last time I remember walking into a club at 7:30 in the morning is probably in Vegas at Dre's in a much different context. And it surely wasn't the don't die context. If anything, like the
It's
biggest
the
thing
opposite.
it was the opposite of the don't die summit. What I needed in Vegas was the opposite, which was a detox, right? Like I was like, oh my gosh, where's the wind spa when I need it? But yeah, walking into Dre's at 7:30 in the morning was not it. This was, hey, let's get our energy moving. Let's set the
Nice.
stage. And he got in kind of like a big circle. He had his dad there and his son there, and it was actually really, really beautiful to watch. But you know, his keynote was really interesting. I'll shift to the keynote because yeah, he sets the stage really, really hard. He challenged the audience to basically consider AI, if in the face of superintelligence were as primitive as early humans, what does that actually mean for us in this very moment, right? So to truly thrive, we need to create new models of reality, and we just don't know. So
Mm.
what is it to incite that we are capable of fostering, you know, 10,000 years of prosperity down the future? So I'll talk about 10,000 years of prosperity because that's my own credo with Dial In, and I'll connect the dots. But like you said, the highlight of the summit was him just being this embodiment of how we all should live, right? Because he is a walking case study. He's essentially reduced his biological age by 15 or so more years through very, very rigorous biohacking protocols. It ranges from the dietary regimens, which we'll get into, to advanced therapies like plasma exchange. He even exemplifies how cutting edge health interventions can completely reverse aging. And his protocols include something, very, very nutrient dense. You'd love it, D, because it's a plant-based diet. He also incorporates intermittent fasting, a strict exercise regimen designed to maintain muscle mass and optimize cardiovascular health. And then he also uses cycles of peptides like follistatin to enhance muscle regeneration. And he also employs epigenetic age tracking to monitor the success of these interventions. Now, to sum up the summit, there was an amusement park where he had all of his brand partners, and I participated in some of those tests, right? I participated in the Generation Labs DNA test. And so I'll dive into that because there's two different tests that you can take. One is your DNA test, and then the other is for gene expression. So Nucleus Labs does the DNA test, Generation Labs does the gene expression test. I'm still waiting on one result, but I already got the Nucleus Labs one. And then you do other things to test your epigenetic age, right? So grip strength is one, your VO2 max is another, continuous push-ups, certain stretching exercises. And that's a little bit separate from, doing the actual blood tests. You could dive much deeper into it and go into like MRIs and stuff, but
Mm.
that's essentially getting the full picture of what your epigenetic age is. And the takeaway from the physical standpoint is you need data and you need to understand the structure of your DNA. And then you also need, as a baseline, to understand gene expression. And so this is a nice continuation from what we had talked about before, because the foundational baseline is get sleep, eat very, very well, and exercise. And it's in that order, right? He prioritizes sleep first. And
Amazing.
then super, super nutrient rich, dense foods. And then exercise, he only works out like 6 to 8 hours a week. So for us, that's kind of counterintuitive, right? You would think. But again, he's optimizing to don't die. He's not optimizing to
Yeah.
putting up as much weight in the gym as possible.
Yeah.
And then we dove into the keynotes with different CEOs, which I'll get into. I'll get into some of the advanced technologies that I had mentioned, and then we wrapped up with networking sessions. And then I didn't attend the after party. I was pretty beat after, and I just wanted to go to In-N-Out after that whole thing, which I
You
actually
did the
did,
pre.
which was the
You did the pre-party.
yeah,
Or the.
I did the pre-party, so I was done. But
Okay.
overall, really, really amazing event. And it planted seeds, definitely not just for my own health journey and how I think about it, but yeah, I'd love to get into the super intelligence portion and then start to kind of disseminate between the philosophy, the protocol, and then also how to implement things in your own life. But that's a long-winded summary of the summit.
Well, let me ask you this. So, is his philosophy, Brian's philosophy, all about just adding years to life? Is it just about longevity, or is he playing a bigger game here? Well, I mean, what's the bigger picture with this don't die philosophy?
Yeah. I love how you dove right into that, because that is the mind bending shift, because I'm thinking about this in multiple ways, right? And so we know that he's a serial entrepreneur. We know that he had a massive exit with Braintree and Venmo when he sold it to PayPal for $800 million. You need to also know his backstory, because he used to be in the Mormon Church,
Mm,
and so I find this really fascinating about human psychology, because what he says, and this is coming from him in speaking at numerous podcasts, and I had to kind of piece things together because I am familiar with the LDS Church at some capacity, but he had mentioned that, for everything that happened that caused suffering, whether it was a loved one that had died, or a tragic accident or something just insufferable that happens to you, um, you make up a story for it. Now, there are principles in a Bible or a book or a doctrine that says you should live this way, which definitely added benefit to his life. But it seems like he moved away from that, and he left the church, started a company, was massively successful in his 20s. By the time he sold that company, he had already planted the seed for this whole aspect of don't die.
mm,
And you alluded to it correctly. So in the era of superintelligence, his philosophy extends not just in his physical sense, but also to every corner of society. His message isn't just about living longer, it's about living better, living smarter, transcending the limitations of our biological programming. And something that was super, super key in the keynote was that algorithmic models are meant to basically quantify everything. And so our rally cry isn't just don't die for ourselves. Yes, there's an aspect of it that is about longevity, extending life. And he says that very explicitly. It's like, yeah, I want to live forever, if not forever, then like for 150, 200 years. So quite literally extending these capacities. And Ray Kurzweil has discussed this. Aubrey de Grey has discussed this. A lot of the transhumanists that I've interacted with before, as far back as 2015, have discussed this, even though a lot of what we're talking about in terms of like Neuralink, um, whole brain emulation, which is uploading your consciousness into like your laptops, and things that are just crazy, crazy cryo, like freezing yourself like Joe DiMaggio and then waking up 1,000 years into the future, things like that that are just, very, very sci-fi ish, which is why it's very controversial. But he's asking something very fundamentally different, which is, are we, as primitive Homo erectus, compared to what super intelligence will be? The variance is so huge, the gap is so big that we can't potentially understand what that gap is, and how to live in a new way with super intelligence. So he's posing something different, which is, all right, let's do this thought experiment. uh 300 years into the future, if
mm.
humans were to look at our day and age now in 2024, what would they say about this AI moment, about what turned the corner? What was our equivalent of a microscope? What was our equivalent of understanding that things happened at a microscopic level, and how viruses and bacteria emerge? What about penicillin and antibiotics? And if you think about every major significant health milestone that's happened since, let's say, the 500s or the medieval times, something as simple as washing your hands before you deliver a baby, or filtering water, getting a water filtration system to prevent the spread of cholera, right? And so you remember that people that were actually drinking booze and beer, and I don't recommend this today, if they were drinking booze in like the 1600s relative to those that were drinking water, they have a higher probability to survive, and they had no idea why. It's because the fermentation was getting rid of the bacteria and the viruses, and people that were drinking water were getting
That's
cholera,
crazy.
right? So
Yeah.
so what would happen if we fast forward 200 years from now, and we have people that completely understand AI? Maybe they've merged with AI. We have no idea. What would they say about this moment that we live in today? And what would they say that the major milestone is with super intelligence and AI? And nobody's talking about AI in this way, right? It's
Mm,
it's the intersection between genetic expression the genetic mutation and the ability to map the human genome in a way where we could essentially 3D print ourselves, our cells, have nanobots floating within our bloodstream and even potentially our brains with like Neuralink and things like that. So it just
Mm.
opens up the realm of possibility, but it hinges on one central point, which is, could we at least agree on don't die? Can we agree that we do not want to kill ourselves? We definitely don't want to get into world wars. Can we agree that we just don't die? And yeah, what do you think about that philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, so what I really like about Brian's whole "don't die" philosophy is that it's 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 like upgrading your old iPhone, right? You're not just tacking on more years, you're optimizing the whole system, is what I'm hearing you say, right? So if you think about it as running old software, right, you're updating the software on aging hardware, which is a really fascinating concept because while the hardware is aging, right, the software updates that it's getting is basically elevating the hardware to be able to do things that it wasn't able to do before. And what I really like about his motto about don't die, and I think this is the real kicker, is that it's not just about you living, a few extra decades. It's about, and the way he's doing it or the approach he's taking is it's about the future of the human race. I mean,
That's it.
that's a big idea, right? I mean, he's playing three-dimensional chess while we're kind of still trying to figure out checkers, right?
Yeah, you
And
got it.
and when you say superintelligence is coming, and if we don't upgrade ourselves, right, we'll get left behind, right? So he's
Yeah,
thinking super long term. Like,
yeah,
how do we humans evolve when AI is going to start outpacing us?
yes,
So that's a
most
really
definitely.
big idea.
I love
Um,
it. And yeah, and it happened also like on the cusp of the ChatGPT o1 drop, which I had kind of early access to. And it was just so funny as like it dropped quite literally
see
like
above minor flex. That's Nikos's way of doing just a minor flex. See above.
Oh, that's too funny. That's too funny. But it did happen like 48 hours after the Don't Die conference, and so I got to
Nice.
play with it, and it just
Yeah, you
instead of
went all
talking about
nerd.
its power,
You went all nerd mode on it. You sent me a bunch of messages.
yeah. We'll unpack that later in our later episode. But what I
Yeah.
found ironic about it was he challenged you to think: Are we are we this frog in gradually boiling water? Like,
Mm,
is
that's
the
powerful.
exponential curve of accelerating returns already so far gone that we're seeing improvements not within a year, we're seeing improvements within 6 months, we're seeing improvements within 4 months of these models, right? And we're in a place now where the hardware is having a hard time catching up with the software because the software just keeps iterating, like you had mentioned.
Mm,
And I will say, if once we start to transition into kind of more of the actual health protocols, but I do want to stay here in a moment because he's talking about broadening the aperture and addressing things that are far more upstream than, well, I got to get a new job, or how do I work
yeah.
with ChatGPT, or
Yeah.
I got to fix my diet, or I have a propensity for type 2
Absolutely.
diabetes. It's just he's looking at it as at a societal level, at a collective intelligence level, this is it. Like, we're at an all hands on deck moment. Like, we need to do something now. There's a sense of urgency here. And so I took my entrepreneurship hat off and I put my marketing hat on, and I was like, that's kind of brilliant marketing. It's
Mm,
like you want to start a movement, and the moonshotters, Peter Diamandis, Jason Silva, Elon Musk, all those in kind of like the Singularity University school of thought. Like, let's create these moonshots to integrate superintelligence. But it kind of stayed within Silicon Valley, and
mm,
it stayed within the realm of like tech entrepreneurs like us that are high performers, have companies, really want to do astute things for themselves. But then it didn't really move outside of that realm. This, I really feel like it could. because
Mm,
he's like, okay, how do you get a billion people on board with don't die in the age of social media? And what is that message that can really percolate and penetrate across the board? And he's hosting dinners with like Kim Kardashian and like a bunch of different stars, right? So
of
the message
course.
is out. If
Yeah.
you attend this conference and there were like 1,000 people there, and there was standing room only for his keynote, and he tried to do that exercise where he was like, all right guys, let's do this thought experiment, and he got audience participation with such a large group, and he managed it fairly well. There was obviously still some clunkiness to the conference because it was at Pier 35. Some people were complaining that it was like, oh, they didn't realize it was as cold as it was going to be because it was San Francisco and people didn't get the memo. Things like that were like small. But we got to try out his blueprint, his pudding. We got to try out his some of his supplements and things like that, and his Evo, his olive oil, which is really really huge because it's got like all of the polyphenols and the resveratrol in it. So things like that you get to try out, and then dove right into sessions. So it was actually very very meaningful.
Okay,
So
but before
yeah,
we jump into the protocols,
yeah,
uh, and the movement that he's starting, I think it's important for everyone to really understand the genesis. And you touched on it, and I'd
yeah,
like you to unpack his journey, right? So you mentioned that he grew up in a Mormon community, right? Super religious, but then left at, I believe he left at 21, and he
yes,
started questioning everything, right? So,
yeah.
how do you think that shaped his obsession with not dying and pushing boundaries? Because it's really interesting for someone to look at someone like him, for us to look at someone like him and understand, well,
Hmm.
how do you get to a point where you get super obsessed with an idea? Because on many levels, he's actually now a guinea pig for the human race, right? He's putting
Yes.
himself out there doing things that for the most part have not really been tested, in broad scale, right? And so just can you speak about that, like the genesis of this?
You're gonna love it because I'm going shameless plug to bring it on because
Okay.
like this
Bring
is
it on.
gonna because it's gonna resonate, and it's just this isn't by accident. Like we're not trying to like
Yeah.
shill you products. This is just kind of
Okay.
how it kind of percolated because he had a dark night of the soul.
Mm.
Like he was going through this journey, and after making a ton of money during his exit, he was having a crisis of consciousness. He was like something like 40 50 pounds overweight, and these YouTube videos are up while he was doing, like as a CEO of like Braintree, and he was like on stage like very articulate, but his face was like super super huge, and you could tell he hadn't been sleeping, been eating like Doritos and chips and ice cream and just like indulging in that because his brain was telling him, this is the behavior that we're going to go down this path of this loop. And it was just dopamine spike after dopamine spike after dopamine spike. His marriage was unraveling, his relationship with the church was unraveling, so he
Wow.
got to a point where he had everything and he had nothing at the same time,
You gave
right?
me
And
goosebumps.
yeah, and it was just and you've described a very very similar principle in your book, in your journey, where he was like, man, what am I going to do? And this is where and this is his words, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he was at a point where he wanted to die.
Mm.
So he wanted to
Well, I
kill
commit suicide.
himself.
Yeah.
Like he wanted to commit suicide. And he was very, very public about that. And so when he finally turned the corner and something happens, right? Like something happens at the dark night of the soul where you just wake up one day and you were like, this can't be it. There needs to be something more. And so the
Mm.
genesis of Don't Die was that he wanted to die, right?
Mm.
So yeah, that's the best way I could describe the potential of it. And I can't speak for Bryan Johnson fully, but he's described these in podcasts. But there was
Wow.
something that happened there in that time period of I want to die, I want to kill myself. I feel like
That's
I have
deep.
everything. I have money, but like, what do I want to do? What is my purpose? Then it becomes a crisis of consciousness, right? What am I
Yeah.
meant here to do? And then he gets there. He actually goes there, which I absolutely love. What am I supposed to do in this world? What is my purpose? What is my gift?
Nice.
And then he says it now, and he's like, what is my contribution? So when
Mm.
you ask the universe, you create the space for it. What happens? The universe fills it for you. And
Mm.
and that was the turning point for him. I believe.
Yeah, I read somewhere where he so that's really deep, right? And I read somewhere so his dad, I believe, was the leader of the church or
Yep.
one of the figures in the church, and how a lot of what's driving him isn't just about his obsession with biohacking, like you mentioned, it's trauma, right? He
Hmm.
grew up seeing his dad get painted as the villain for leaving the church. And then later, he goes through, as you said, suicidal thoughts, right? And it's no wonder he's all about, it seems like he's all about control. Because
Yeah.
when your life feels like it's spiraling, and if you've been there,
Hmm.
like you're losing control, the instinct is to basically just grab the steering wheel with both hands and never let go,
Yes.
right? So his version
Yes.
of control is he builds the most regimented, data driven life possible because he
Yeah.
doesn't even trust his own mind anymore because his
Yes.
mind
Yeah.
almost led him to take his own life, right? So
Right.
now he's all about, okay, how can I outsource, my life, my habits to data, right?
Yeah.
To AI. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's really powerful.
I love that you said that because that is a key piece to his philosophy. And we can unpack this later because I also feel like it's somewhat flawed. But
Mm,
from his perspective, he says this a lot. He's like, I couldn't trust my own brain anymore.
mm,
And I can't trust my own mind. And I don't, I feel like I shouldn't tell people to trust their own minds either because of the fact that, hey, you know, one moment I want to do this, the next moment I want to do
yeah,
something that's completely the
fickle,
opposite.
completely
Super,
fickle.
super fickle. The mind is
Yeah.
super, super fickle. And only data will tell the truth. So let's
Mm,
actually start to map it out. What's happening to these various interdependent systems that's going on in my heart, my kidneys, my my endocrine system, my endocrinology, my blood system, my muscles, my brain. Let's actually look at the data and measure absolutely everything. And now we have kind of a basis, a foundation to speak of. Otherwise, in the health space, everybody's just kind of waxing poetic about their philosophy. Vegan's the way
yeah.
to go. No, carnivore
Yeah.
is the way to go. Keto is the way to
Pescatarian.
go. No, yeah,
Yeah.
pescatarian is the way to go. And then you just kind of get into trouble very quickly when really in an ideal perspective, you can look at things holistically and then start to dial in, right? I
Yeah.
am of this phenotype and genotype of this age. I have a propensity for whatever type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular health, some psychological disorders and things like that. And so you really need to focus on the data, which I do like. But to your point, not to get dive too deep into the psychology of it and start to psychoanalyze Bryan Johnson, but many people have actually taken a stab at that. You're absolutely right. He went from kind of like this complete faith-based approach to just this very Western, like rigorous scientific study. Show me the
Mm,
data or it's not there.
yeah.
I kind of feel like he threw the baby out with the bathwater on faith and surrender because there's a lot of things that you could still incorporate that. So he almost just like packaged up meditation, spirituality, faith. He just kind of like threw all that in there and said, if I could get my aura to 100 for 8 months straight, it's in there with sleep. So he's
Yeah. The
basically saying
aura
like, if I
ring.
could,
Yeah.
yeah, the aura ring. If I could sleep well, I don't
Yeah.
need to meditate. I don't need to rest. I don't need spirituality. I don't need God because I have good sleep. So he actually packaged that all in there, which I thought was actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. You referenced the dark night of the soul. It's
Yeah.
like being in a fishbowl, right? It sounded like
Yeah.
he was in a fishbowl, and you think when you're in a fishbowl that that's the whole ocean.
Yes.
And then someone, taps on the glass and you're like, "Holy crap, wait a minute. What does that mean?" And I think that's exactly what happened to him, right? His world
Yeah.
cracked open and suddenly he started questioning everything. And I think the really cool part is that the questioning hasn't stopped, right?
Hmm.
It's like once you get a taste of the bigger world, you
Yeah.
start asking yourself, "Well, what else don't I know? What else can I push past?"
Yes.
And for Brian, that becomes this obsession with human limits, right? Aging,
Hmm.
death, intelligence, all of it. Like he's out there asking, you know, why accept the rules when you can rewrite them?
Yeah, I love that.
It's
Oh,
it's
yeah.
pretty it's pretty
I
wild.
love that. He didn't accept any premise. Yeah, he didn't accept the premise. You're absolutely right. Somebody tapped into the fishbowl. It's hard not to go back to Matrix analogies and be
Yeah,
like, well, if your worldview is only like this big, of course that's how you're going to live, and of course that's how you're going to live your life and exercise certain principles and live day to day. But what if your aperture grows this big? Like, what is it now? Like, what in the age of superintelligence? Again, you kind of like loop that back here. Like, what does it mean to rewrite your own software? What does it
yeah,
rewrite? What does it mean to rewrite your own hardware? He's not even talking about like your own software. Your software is the mind. You can change your mind, you can change your behavior, you can change all your perspectives about things. But now you can rewrite yourself. You can rewrite your organs, you can rewrite your genetic expression and capabilities. So he's preparing
wild.
us for that world. And that's when
Yeah,
it's just like
yeah.
mind-blowing stuff right there.
So let's get super mind blowing stuff.
Hey there. We're taking a quick break from the show to let you know that if you'd like to invite Dirain or Nikos to speak at your next event on topics ranging from emergence and the inner game to the future of AI, we've got you covered. Simply email us at info@emergencenowpod.com. Once again, that's info@emergencenowpod.com. Now, let's dive back to the show.
Let's get into the fun stuff, right?
Let's do it.
How do
Let's do
we
it.
how do we actually live forever? I mean, clearly it's not just about avoiding donuts, right? I mean, it's really about optimizing your
Yeah.
existence on a cellular
Yeah.
level. And I know you
Yep.
went deep down the rabbit hole, and you've
I
been
did.
doing this for a number of years, and
Yep.
now you attend this summit, and you meet someone like this who, you know,
Hmm.
who's doing it at a whole other level, and so you
Yep.
went even deeper in the rabbit hole. So
That's right.
like the deep nerdy stuff, like the
Yes.
epigenetics and the
Yeah.
biological clock.
Right.
I mean, how do we actually live forever?
Yeah. That's a great place to start and to transition into the fun stuff like you had mentioned. Uh,
Are
one
we
way to
ready to
set the
go?
table.
Are we
We're
ready to
ready.
go there? Okay, let's go.
100%. I love it. The
Take
the way
us.
to set the table for this is it's still philosophy, but we're getting into now kind of the physical aspect. And the mind bender for me, and it'll be a little bit hard for people to grasp at first, but then once you start kind of, speaking to us or diving into his own protocol, it'll get easier. We have our chronological age, right? Next October, I'm turning 47, and Bryan Johnson is around the same age, but he was looking at age completely differently because now he's got specialists and doctors doing scans and grabbing data through various organ systems. So you get your epigenetic age, your biological age, from measuring the different systems in your body because we're a constellation of organs, right? We're a bunch of different systems. We're not just one thing. And yes, on average, over time, I have aged 47 years old, and that's the same for everybody else. But what about my body? My body is aging. Different parts of my body are aging in different ways. And here's one of his examples. His left ear is 67 years old, and there was no way to reverse that. Why? Because he was exposed to a lot of loud music and didn't wear ear
No.
protection shooting guns as he was growing up. So his
What?
ears, his ears are 67. And he's like, we couldn't fix that no matter what. Like there was no surgery, no supplement. Like I couldn't fix that whatsoever. And he mentions that it's 67. His heart, his cardiovascular capacity, his VO2 max is at the top 1% of 18-year-olds. Okay. I
Wow.
bet yours is there too.
So
I'm,
he's
I'm willing
reversed
to bet.
that though.
He's reversed it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's reversed it with certain things that he's taking. So my point here is that his cardiovascular system, your endocrine system, your muscle fibers, your blood. You have to look at your circulatory system, and then the brain is a big one, right? Like it's really hard to measure, like unless you have full blown MRIs, EEGs, and taking specific brain scans. it's hard to measure your brain health. But the point being is you have different systems that age at different times based on what you've done to your body. So if you were, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day since you were 12 years old, at 30 years old, your lungs could be 60. And that's the
Mm.
scary thing, right?
Mm.
If you were drinking a 6 pack a day starting at 15 years old up to the point where you're 30, you're having, you have kids now with like brain shrinkage at 30 years old. It's like, dude, you've been drinking for like 15 years straight and on these benders, your brain is 50 years old. Sorry.
Mm.
Can you reverse it? Absolutely. Can you stop and halt time a little bit on it and take the right kind of supplements for neurogenesis, things like that? Absolutely. So
Mm.
that sets the table for understanding your chronological age versus your biological age, right?
Mm.
And so with that, now we dive into, all right, let's go with the baseline: diet and nutrition, sleep, supplementation, and then what we call kind of like advanced therapies and things like that. I won't cover diet and nutrition too much, other than he follows kind of this precise caloric intake based on very, very nutrient dense plant-based foods to optimize his health and longevity. He eats within a very, very small window, which is 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. 11 a.m.
Yeah.
is his last meal.
Yeah.
And then he fasts for like the rest of the day. And then he meticulously tracks macronutrient and micronutrient levels, ensuring that his diet supports optimal bodily function and cognitive health. And what I like about what he said, and he's got his own tagline for the food supplements that he creates, which means he's a brilliant marketer as well. He says, every calorie needs to fight for its life, meaning if the calorie and the nutrient profile, the composition of the nutrient profile isn't serving don't die, he boots it out. Now that I found that very, very interesting in the way that he's curated and optimized for his health. I mentioned intermittent fasting, so regular fasting intervals integrated into his daily routine to boost his cellular generation and improve metabolic capacity. Exercise, I was really surprised about this one because he adheres to a personalized fitness plan that he just does alone at home, but he's only doing
Alone.
it for alone. Yeah, he doesn't have like a crazy trainer, and he's ripped, right? He's not like massive and super, super jacked, but he is shredded. And
He's
that's what I
lean.
wanted to, he's lean, but
Yeah.
he's lean and shredded.
What's his
but
body
got,
fat?
Like
What's
his
his body
fat's
fat?
at like 7%. He hovers between
Okay.
6 and 9 at any given time. So again,
Yeah.
you're looking at percentages based on the statistical significance of your average, right? So he's at the top 1% of lean body muscle mass and fat of also 19-year-olds. So in these
Nice.
various systems of 19-year-olds, he's up there as well in terms of lean body mass. And he said in aggregate, there's probably only 1 or 2 people that have like the best epigenetic profile relative to him.
That's wild.
It is wild. Yeah. I mentioned VO2 max tracking. I want to do this one again. I realized that my particular training, and you're going to kick butt at this, VO2 max training, it's just like how much oxygen are you utilizing in your body when you are like at
That's
your
the game.
like just that's the whole game. I bet yours is like probably at the top 1% of also like 20-year-olds because of your specific training. Have you done any measurement around VO2 max?
I haven't recently. I have in the past, and
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I'm actually due for one in the next couple of weeks, so we'll touch on it in the next episode.
Yeah.
We should actually do one just on VO2 and just various markers.
Yeah, we absolutely should. So yeah, I love how it opens up the aperture for what we're talking about here. So VO2
Have you measured
max,
yours recently?
I didn't get to. The line was just like super, super long at the conference. So I scheduled one. I definitely want to show like my data. So I have, I want to do the VO2 max one. I didn't want to do it the way that they were tracking it too, because they had like a treadmill. I want to do it like on the bike. So for my knees, right? So I want to just, I like really, really blow it out, but I don't want my knees to give out before like I'm at the full capacity. So I want to do it kind of in a place where I could measure properly based on what I got, and shoot, like maybe I'll measure the knees too. It'd be like, oh yeah, maybe my knees are like 60 years old because I played basketball. So that
Mm.
actually goes into what we were talking about. It's like, the wear and tear in your body, that
Yeah.
should be measured differently than your heart and your lungs, and measured differently than your brain, right? So that's really kind of like the big takeaway here. So he uses like different supplements like NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide, and
Mhm.
it's a supplement that boosts like NAD levels, and it's really crucial for cellular repair.
Hold
He
on.
takes
NAD.
metformin.
And
Yeah,
just double click on that. NAD
yeah.
being.
NAD, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the supplement that boosts the NAD levels. So it's what NAD is. It's crucial for cellular repair. It's like so every cell that you have has the mitochondria for
Yeah.
regeneration, and that's what gives you kind of regeneration in your brain cells. It helps you heal better anytime you catch a cold or things like that. It just helps the body regenerate and heal itself, and it slows down the aging process, right? So he takes certain
Yeah.
supplements for that.
Is this
He
his
was
product?
taking, I don't know if he's got a specific NMN product, but he does have
Okay.
other supplements that are optimizing for mitochondrial health.
Have you?
And he uses
Yeah.
that as part of his stack. But my point here was that he takes certain prescriptions that are not available over the counter. And that's a
I
good
was just
good
gonna ask.
segue. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
segue too. It's like regardless of all of this, you don't want to take our advice. We're just two guys on the internet
Yes.
passionate about this stuff. We are not healthcare professionals, right? And so definitely consult your
Disclaimer.
healthcare. Yeah, disclaimer.
Yeah.
Definitely hit up your healthcare professionals, but hopefully it unlocks a bunch of research for you as well. He takes metformin, which is interesting. So metformin is used to regulate blood glucose and potentially extend lifespan by reducing the oxidative stress on your body. So that's a huge one. There's omegas that are part of his stack as well, but they're all part of like this. He's got a shake. He's got a longevity shake where he incorporates like 50 of the 100 supplements, and then he's got pills that he's just packaged up in Blueprint. And then you get 2 recipes, and then with that, by spending, I don't know, I think something like $1,000 a month, you get that whole blueprint in addition to groceries. But I've already been stacking on like a lot of this stuff. I'm just what I should be dialing in on is, how do I tweak the right dosage per supplement based on my profile, based on the new data that I've been starting to get. So to round out the point that you were mentioning earlier is, okay, Nikos, you've been on this journey. You're doing a lot of diet, nutrition. Yes, cold plunge is a religion now, like all of that stuff. What's next? Where I realize I could have improved a lot more. And I'm a data guy, right? It's like I am not nearly measuring what I should be measuring. There's so much more that you could be measuring. And
Mm.
even in my DNA test that I got, it wasn't anything mind blowing. I did get some surprising results. Like I'm exceptionally high risk based on my DNA profile, that I'm at a higher risk than average for OCD, like obsessive compulsive disorder, which was surprising to me because I feel like this is where I've already offset the gene expression component of it with meditation, right? Yes,
Mm.
I have OCD tendencies, and I noticed when I'm not meditating, I'm OCD. The brain is running. Did I turn off the lights in my apartment, things like that, and just obsessing over certain things? Should I shoot that email out, at 12 o'clock at night? But meditation has definitely like helped those things specifically. And then other things like I'm going to pause and then we can get into like some of the advanced stuff like plasma
Yeah.
exchange, stem cell therapy. But I'd love for you to kind of
I,
comment on
yeah.
your own journey and
I've
wherever else
got.
you want to go.
Yeah. I wanna actually ask you something that's probably on the minds of people who are listening to us right now. You spoke about DNA. What about DNA testing? I mean, it's
Hmm.
becoming this huge health optimization approach, right?
Hmm.
What do you think? I mean, are we really able to hack our bodies through DNA, or is this just hype?
I think we're there. So here's what I find most interesting about DNA. And this was all unlocked from being able to sequence all of DNA. And you can tie Moore's law to the cost to map the entire human genome. Now I
Sure.
feel it started off at like $20,000 and then it went to $10,000 to $1,000. Now I think you could map the entire genome for like 99 bucks. And that
Yeah.
continues to gain traction because of
I mean,
Moore's
isn't
law.
that what these companies are doing? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
DNA testing, where they send you the results,
Exactly.
23andMe, and a number of them, right?
That's what 23andMe is doing. The one that
Yeah.
I took was Nucleus. and
Okay.
nucleus had 1,000 different attributes. And I actually want to dive into that in the next episode because I want to do like screen sharing, and I'm actually down to share my data, even though I'm all about like data privacy and things like that. This one's
Yeah.
interesting because we're like my own like guinea pig for this type of stuff. And what I liked about nucleus was that yes, it showed me propensities. You could dive into the full report of what they were looking at from a methodological standpoint. Where I'm seeing some of the kind of some of the limitations as a data guy, like I'd like to get my raw data. Like I'd like to get full blown into the statistical correlations, the thousands of different attributes. I'd like to run this through my own Python scripts and like use Chat GPT to actually like, or Copilot to help me like manage my own data. That's a little bit like extreme. So most people that are listening can probably trust the, what they're seeing in the online platform. But yeah, DNA testing, measuring your biological age through these kinds of epigenetic tests to ensure these health interventions are reducing biological markers. The distinction is DNA sequencing your DNA. You do that once, and you're good to go. So here are your propensities. Here's your sequence. Here's your genome. That's not going to change. Your DNA is not going to change. Your fingerprint isn't going to change. But the other piece, generation labs, that is DNA to test at a cellular level gene expression. So gene expression is separate. So what have you been doing in terms of your lifestyle to manipulate how your DNA expresses itself into epigenetic age? What are the
Mm.
biomarkers that you're experiencing today? Have you been spending time on screens too much? Have you been in a very stressful environment where your cortisol levels are up? So that varies over time. And so you need to essentially, as a baseline for testing, you do those two tests. Something like a generation labs for gene expression, and then something like a nucleus labs, or even Blueprint has a DNA test as well. They do 1,000 different DNA attributes, and then from there you can start to build a baseline on your epigenetic and biological age.
That's cool. So it's I mean it's wild, right? Because essentially what you're doing is we're not just talking about feeling good, we're talking about unlocking the code of your body, right?
Yes,
You,
that's
I
right.
mean when you're testing, you're looking under the hood of your car and saying, "Oh, here's why this thing is falling apart at 50." Or here's
Yeah,
why
yeah,
this could fall apart at 70.
that's
So
right.
it's almost like, you know what they're saying is, don't guess how old you are biologically, know it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
like we know
yeah,
it. Here's the data. And
that's right.
that's just
Yeah,
very wild. And I like the
yeah.
tie-in to Moore's law.
Yeah,
Yeah.
computate, and that's the thing, right? So, tying, not to wrap like too tight of a bow around it, but the data tells the story, and it's what's inferring how you should live your life based on your specific profile. And yeah, what's super intelligence going to get us? It's going to get us more data. It's going to get us a
Yeah.
construct of information, because what is DNA? It's information. So that's a
That's it.
very that's a very interesting discussion among the singularitarians, the AI thought leaders. Is the world just made up of information? Is that
Mm,
kind of the known unit? It's not, physical, time, space, like all of these different frameworks for it. If we were looking at one integrated system, so from a purely systems integration standpoint, we're looking at bits of information, and you can manipulate those bits of information. Now there's controversy around like, what is that information? Is it quarks? Is it strings? Is it quantum? Is it electrons?
code.
Yeah, it's code. Yeah, it's like it's written in the code. There's something that you can manipulate, and this is where it's kind of like a brain unlock for you: is can you manipulate the code with your own experience? And this is where I feel like Blueprint falls a little bit. Is he's he's relying
His
a little
blueprint. You're
his
talking about
blueprint.
Brian's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bryan Johnson's blueprint.
Yeah.
And this is where I diverge a little bit. And I encourage everybody to not just listen to one. There isn't just one way to go, because you have to tailor it for your own life. He's basically thrown out any X factor, anything you cannot measure, anything that's a little bit too squishy in terms of like, well, let's make the data tell everything. Well, as a data person, I know data can be manipulated too, right? And I know data has
Yeah.
its flaws, and I know data like for one subset of data that has kind of its composition in the way that you're looking at a specific control group, there is another group that you're completely missing certain attributes. And there's always broader and broader ranges of aperture on how you segment that group. So data can be flawed as well. So I wouldn't count too much on data because there's always different ways to interpret that data, which is also
Yeah.
why we're kind of in this age of mis and disinformation, is that like,
Yeah.
okay, we have so much digital information. The more information we pump at it doesn't necessarily mean we get to consensus or truth or any kind of information integrity. There's always ways to kind of manipulate that data to tell another story, right? So that's where it becomes really, really
And
like
the
a kind
interpretation of it.
conundrum.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that's fascinating because now you're moving from DNA testing.
Mhm.
So DNA testing is now rapidly moving beyond just your traditional health assessments into
Mhm.
now a full on body optimization, right?
That's right.
Uh,
Yeah.
And then you're able to now, get into how these advancements allow us to not just predict health issues, but actually start actively prevent or even reverse them, right?
Mhm.
The reversal is the key. I mean, I like the ear example where, he was exposed to loud music and now, the ears in his in its 60s.
Yeah.
So not everything can be reversed, but there are parts of you that can be reversed. Fascinating.
I
So
anticipate even just the awareness of this is powerful, right, Darren? Because
yeah,
it's like, it's kind of a wake up call for people that have been like living on the edge and kind of have this like YOLO mentality when you're
yeah,
like, oh, I kind of don't want to know how old my kidneys are, kind of a thing, right? You're like,
yeah.
I kind of like the people that have been doing this that haven't been taking care of themselves. It's kind of a wake up call, right? It's like, do you really want to know? Like if you look under the covers, under the hood there, like it's I imagine people kind of having some challenges with that in an age where anything can be exposed. How vulnerable are you willing to be in order to get to a place where you can have your own personal health unlocked?
So we all know sleep is important, but with everything going on, how do you even start optimizing it? I mean, what's the deal with all this sleep tech? And he's really big on sleep. It's blowing
Hmm.
up. I wear an
Yeah.
Aura ring. What's your sense? Like what did you hear? What did you feel? What did you observe around, the 1,000 people that were there? I mean, are they all dialed in with their sleep, or are people still, because when I look around me, I still feel like people are asking, okay, what can I do? And I always say, well, get the sleep working dialed in first, like fix
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're not dialing in your sleep, you're basically out here playing life on hard mode.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
who chooses that? Like, sleep is the ultimate, it's actually a cheat code, right? So you're
That's right.
basically trying
Yeah.
to run a marathon on a
Yep.
treadmill set up on uphill. That's not fun, right? It's not
Yeah.
smart. It's not fun. Why
Yeah.
would you want to do that? First,
No.
dial in the sleep. What are your
I
thoughts? What did you observe?
I love this one because I've been experiencing this in my own daily life, and you would experience this because we've both reached that point of burnout. And the funny thing is, it's like a cultural thing too, right? Like the whole notion of the entrepreneur working 80 hours a week and sleeping 2 hours a night, that we just got to throw that away. We just
Yeah.
got to dump that away, right? Like, my baby first, my startup first, all this and that, like glamorizing the hustle culture, that's going away. Entrepreneurs, CEO, co-founders that are taking care of their health first, that's got to be number one. So take
That's a
care of
public
ourselves.
service announcement,
As a
ladies and
PSA,
gentlemen.
as a PSA, take care of
Yeah.
yourself. As a founder, like health
Yeah.
is number one and sleep is number one. And he describes this in a very funny way, and I could imagine why, because he's been in all of these longevity conferences, and somebody always asks like that one key question: what is the one thing, Bryan, that you would do? Is it rapamycin? Is it like new oxygen tank? Like, what is the most advanced? Is it plasma exchange that you did with your son? And he did that, by the way, too. He like he exchanged plasma with his son. That was one of the
Mm.
more controversial advanced therapies that he did, and he didn't see the effect from it, and so he booted it. Right, so that's an
Mm.
interesting one. But whenever he answers this question, everybody's just like a sigh, and they're like, "Huh." he just says sleep more, sleep more.
Yeah.
What do you do to actually like sleep better at night? And it's just so boring, so simple. It's the easiest thing to implement. One, sleep at the same time every night.
Yeah.
Two, sleeping earlier is better. And then three, wait at least 2.5 hours after your last meal to go to sleep.
Mm.
And that's it. And it's just so stupid simple that people
Mm.
are so underwhelmed by it. But like
Why do you
you're
think that
experiencing
is?
it
Why do you
because
think
sleep
that
is
is?
boring and we've taken it for granted, even though we spend a third of our lives sleeping. And it's like it's also stupid because people, you can feel the difference. I feel the difference because like once you're optimized to sleep, you get one night of poor sleep, you notice the difference. Like the other night was a perfect example. I was up super early because I was like doing stuff on Friday. Like we got together, we couldn't do our pod because of the tech issue or whatever. And then I continued to jam, and I ended up going to the wedding. It was a lot of fun. Didn't drink a drop of alcohol. It was still fun. And then I still stayed up until I think it was like 2. Like when I finally got to bed, it was like 2:30, and then I got up at 8:30, which is okay. So 6 hours, I felt the difference. Like I was pretty much
Yeah.
like in brain fog mode all of Saturday, even though I
Yeah.
ate well, kind of got to my regimen. Last night, got a solid 8 hours, and I'm like good to go, dialed in. Nikos
Yeah.
9.5, right? Like
Nice.
you feel the
Nice.
difference,
Winning.
even though it's like super boring, right? Sleep early, sleep at the
Yeah.
same time every night. Don't
Yeah.
eat like too close to bedtime. It's stupid simple,
Simple.
but it's like
So
so boring.
simple. Yeah.
Yeah,
And people always want to know, like, what are the hacks around sleep? Like blackout
yeah,
curtains, fancy sheets,
yeah,
room temperature. But
yeah.
what's the real trick? Just get good sleep, as he said,
Just
right? And
get
as
good
you did
sleep.
recently, just that's it.
I mean,
I
some of
mean,
the minor hacks.
yeah.
Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say we've all
Yeah,
met that guy who brags about how little he sleeps, and
yeah,
I think the whole hustle culture hasn't done
yeah.
us any favors, right? Because
Mhm.
everyone kind of brags about it. It's like some badge of honor. Well, that's old school. Like,
Yeah,
we know better now. I mean, think about it. How much better would you perform if you were actually rested? It's really
that's
that
right.
simple, right?
Yeah,
If you're rested, you're going to perform at a much higher level.
yeah,
So, like challenging the hustle culture that's glorified sleeping under the desk mythology. I mean, but times
yeah,
are changing. People are
yeah.
are waking up to the fact that you know they can achieve greatness without sacrificing health. I think we've always
100%.
thought that it was this zero sum, like this binary choice we had to make, right, in
Yeah.
order for us to win and be successful.
I love that. I love that. And some of the hacks, if you were to force out like a few hacks from this, is obvious ones too, right? Like don't look at your phone right before you go to bed. In fact, have the phone in the other room, and don't use your phone to wake up in the morning. And sure, blackout curtains. Um, have a room that's only dedicated to sleep is another one that he has, right?
Yeah,
It's like that's the only thing that you're doing is sleeping in that room, and there's no distractions, no nothing. You don't have like anything that would potentially like stimulate your brain and really kind of get that circadian rhythm start to go. But yeah, the big one for me is that, like, same time every night and a little bit earlier every night. So I'm going to start to be like you. I'm going to go for 8:30, 9 p.m. and then up by 4:35.
yeah. So sleep. Okay. Anything else?
I'll touch on some more of the advanced stuff. The reason why I don't want to spend too much time on the advanced stuff is because it's a little bit early and it's not accessible to everybody, right? So there are
Okay.
things that are very bleeding edge, like plasma exchange therapy, what they're calling parabiosis, I believe. And it's the idea that young blood can rejuvenate the old. It's been kind of the stuff of like science fiction, but it's focusing on plasma, right? In these types of experiments, older rats experienced muscle and cognitive rejuvenation when their circulatory systems were joined with younger ones. And could this same science reverse the effects of aging? There's some new research that's shown that plasma therapy is the way to go for these types of things, but it starts at like 10K. So I'll just mention that in passing.
Mm.
If you want to do kind of your own research on it, totally fine. But I'll talk about, some of the other stuff. We talked about measurement. There's really good participation in clinical trials, based on the leading institutions of gene expression therapy, which is what I took with Generation Lab. They're involved in like multiple research collaborations. And what I like about them is that they're not just using a logistic or linear regression to predict a lot of the gene expression therapies. They're looking at what's called noise in biomarkers. So it's like, how is noise playing a role in
Mm.
all of the things that shouldn't be in that organ profile or that system profile? That's super, super interesting. So I like that as a data person. And it's just a very different dialed in approach. And then there was some exome sequencing, things like that are a little bit bleeding edge. So taking a look at the 3 billion base pairs for an individual person's DNA, and then looking at the in-depth analysis that provides, just going beyond kind of the standard markers, but now we're diving into the methodology and things like that. So I will just say that all of this can be at your disposal, again, by going to your healthcare provider and looking for advanced gene therapies and things like that. So have a conversation, right? I'll also say that it's interesting who you choose as kind of the person that you go to. So what I like about the ecosystem that he's set up is that he's now going to have like a certification process, like a blueprint certification process, because
Nice.
he talks about the vendors that he likes to work with. Like a good example is he teed up a person that'll set up a custom alkaline defiltering or alkaline and filtering system, oxygenated water filtration system in Chicago. And so he'll send the unit, and then you just got to call like a plumber to do the specs and things like that. And so it's a bit of a project, but $1,000 to have like 100% like filtered water, alkaline rich, oxygenated. Tap water's dirty, so things like that, right? And he mentioned how, and this one's going to be a little bit scary for people, but like the food system has always been very, very challenging. And
Broken.
as an entrepreneur, like we know as a business, like being in the food business just really, really sucks. But he's so passionate about it that he's wanted to source his own food from his own third party providers, because when they were doing their own testing on things like black lentils, where you were looking at microplastics or heavy metals, even when the FDA puts that approval on it, even when it says 100% organic, he's like, don't trust any label. Don't trust anything. You have to source your own food, which is like, dude, come on. How can we source our own food? Well, hopefully he's providing that ecosystem. Obviously, that's going to be his own sales pitch, but
Sure.
the integrity of materials becomes very, very important to all of these things, which is why he's at the forefront. And so we'll see. I'm not going to overly advocate for Blueprint just yet. I want to try it first, and then tell our listeners this is the way to go. So we'll go there. We had mentioned optimizing mind and body for sleep brain connection. So there's a company called Earable that I found interesting. We'll throw that as a link on the chat. So met the CEO, Kimmy Doan, and she had kind of this really strong thesis that we're talking about now, which is your brain power is only as good as your rest. And so
Nice.
wearing this wearable technology, her team is basically revolutionizing how we understand sleep through brainwave data. And so not only does it diagnose issues, but it optimizes the entire night's recovery based on your brainwave pattern. So it's a combination of like EEGs and what Neuralink is doing as well. But like you mentioned, it's the foundation of physical and cognitive health. And then there were some other wild ones that we don't need to get into too much, but a company called Orchid, which is engineering the future of genetic optimization for creating super babies, essentially. So,
Ooh.
could we engineer the next generation of healthier, smarter, more resilient babies? That's where we're going next, right? We're in this world of Gattaca now. So where else are we going to
Mm.
go, right? So genome sequencing, you want to create the right biomarkers for gene expression. Why not select or pre-select the most optimal traits? Obviously, this unlocks a ton of moral and ethical issues, which Gattaca has explored, by the way. But would you be able to remove different propensities toward OCD, type 2 diabetes, anxiety disorder, things like that, that have a pre-genetic disposition for genes to express themselves in these types of biomarkers? Is that a way to go? So
Mm.
yeah, we're in sci-fi world, baby. So genetic
Yeah.
optimization, things like that.
Bring it
Um,
on.
bring it on. Like that's kind of where
It's not
we're
even
at. So
sci-fi anymore. It's
it's
like
not. Yeah.
it's not sci-fi, right? Excellent. I want to just go back to something you said earlier about, you know, how he was asked that question. What's the one thing, right? Because we're all, I think everyone's just, you know, kind of waiting around for the secret to more energy, more productivity, more success, right? And really the answer is sleep. But I've got one more thing for you.
Yeah.
So sleep is key, obviously. There's no doubt about that. But another thing I've been journaling around is this future self mindset. So you're not living for, and I think this really, ties into his philosophy, which is, you're not really living your present self. You're setting your future self up for success. So think about it. If the choices you made today shape the person that you're going to be in 20 years, right? I'm now making moves and decisions for the future me. So future there and me, can chill on a beach somewhere while still crush it. Like, you know what I mean? Like just be
Yeah.
able to make moves now for the future version. Just that idea of the future self, that mindset can be really,
Yes.
really powerful.
Yeah. What I love
Yeah.
about this, it rounds out everything that we've been talking about, right? Which is if you have something similar to a don't die mindset that unlocks something for yourself, could it also unlock something for all of society? And I love that because you're absolutely right. Would the Nikos at 65 be even better than the Nikos at 47? Right? Like,
Yeah.
why not? Like, who
Why not?
wants to kind of
Absolutely.
hone in and make these electrons collapse? It's like, oh yeah, just want to get job after job, and then at 65, maybe retire and
Yeah.
have some money enough to like. It's like, no, why can't I be thriving at like 70, 80? Like, why can't I be starting a business at 85? Right? Like, why
Yeah.
why not? Like, and it's that growth mindset that puts you there, right? But you have to plant the seed of possibility. You have to create the space for it. And so I would say, that's my one small criticism of the don't die mentality or the don't die philosophy, is that it's gone so far like scientific method on the West. It's kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater in terms of like some things that you can take away from faith, spirituality, religion, sense of semblance, and kind of connectedness with humanity and all of those stuff that Bryan Johnson would probably consider a little bit woo woo, a little bit woke, and things like that. But all of those things we know have been proven to also optimize yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
yoga nidra and just non-sleep deep rest, right? So things like that, where even if it's like a guided meditation in the morning, and yeah, I wasn't able to get my 8 hours, but if I do my yoga nidra in the morning, or get a really nice meditation session, it still gets the same effects of kind of like a reset. But I love rounding that out today with like, okay, how can you apply these principles
Yeah.
today? It's you start with epigenetic testing, you explore those health optimization therapies if you want, you focus on sleep optimization as a keystone for longevity, and then just framing your health through a more holistic lens
Mm.
where biohacking isn't just like this fringe activity, but a proactive way to take control over your future self. And I really,
Yeah.
I really, really love that.
So I've got a question for you.
Hmm.
You could take the red pill and die of natural causes, or you could take the blue pill and live another 250 years, maybe even longer,
Hmm.
perhaps not even dying.
Yeah.
Which one would you take?
Yeah, I feel like I'm already in blue pill territory with what I'm doing, which shows there's some granularity there. So my
Yeah.
normal answer would be both. And this is a funny one because he's actually set the state. Like, the universe has a way of, it's got a sense of humor, right? So he's like, it's 100% inevitable that I'm going to get hit by a bus, is what he says, right? Because it's like I'm doing all of these things. He's self-deprecating. People don't get that. He's funny. He's like, yeah, I'm setting the stage for me just getting hit by a bus one day or something like that. Because it's like, yeah, you're playing Don't Die every day, and that's another thing. I would like to live as long as possible, but you don't want to live long, or like even let's say in today's standards, to like, where the last 5 years of your life you're suffering, right?
Yeah, of course.
And we feel these with our parents, right? It's like, you could have just done a few things. And I tell my mom this too. It's like, you work out just a little bit more, eat more nutrient rich foods, and put the candy away, and maybe let's get you to stop taking your diabetes or blood pressure meds and get to more
maintenance.
More maintenance. You could make significant changes within 30 days, and you can do that more and more today. So yeah, team blue pill for now. And yeah, how about you?
That's I mean, I love all of this stuff, right? And I've been thinking about this, preparing for this episode. And right now I think the beauty of life is knowing that it's finite.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
when I wake up in the morning, I feel a sense of urgency, to connect, to make an impact, to look after myself, to really absorb, experiences, right? And create memories because of the finite nature and just the fact that, there's this unpredictability makes me feel really alive.
Yep.
I don't know how a blue pill would make me feel. And in the absence of not knowing, I'm always going to err on the side of what I know and what really makes me feel, the most alive. So right now I'm still in red pill territory, not because of any of the science, but it's more philosophical for me. I just knowing that there's a finish line, but then again, there is no finish line, right? And when you look at this from a spiritual perspective, well, this is just a pit. I mean, what is this anyway? Right?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
What is this?
Right.
What is this matrix? Right?
Yeah.
Perhaps a pit stop to a longer, more beautiful journey, right? And so, yeah, I think I'm still in red pill territory.
I love it because this opens up a good one back to the philosophy, and I think it's a good place to end too, because where I feel the blueprint or the don't die credo, the don't die ethos, falls a little bit short. And I'd love to even speak to Bryan directly about this, whether that's going to be in a dinner or we
Let's
invite
get him on
him
a
to
pod.
speak on the pod. Let's get him on the pod for sure. And I'll probably even just go to one of the dinners and then invite him to the pod. We'll do both. But to get him to, like, I want to understand, like, because Don't Die has infinite capabilities, but like, it's lacking the duality portion. It's like, we know that life is beautiful because of death. We know that we can experience the capacity of heaven because we're also seeing hell on earth, right? And so peace and prosperity, like he's talking about, okay, what is prosperity, right? So it's, if you're looking at duality, there's war and peace, but then can you get from peace to prosperity? And he's looking at prosperity. So I'm on the same page as him, but it's like, okay, do we fundamentally understand how the universe works though? Because you're creating space for something else, right? And what does that ultimately mean? And that's kind of a mind-blowing point. It's like, yeah, life is beautiful because we die, because we experience pain. And if everything was, completely infinite, what would that unlock? And that's why it's so interesting, is as we enter the age of super intelligence, we don't ultimately know what that is, but we're planting seeds for the ultimate transformation.
Yeah. One thing I do know is I want to live longer, but not necessarily forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vampire territory.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So here's the deal. Whether you think Bryan's a genius or just totally nuts, one thing's for sure. This dude is thinking on a level most of us haven't even touched on. Here's what we've learned from Bryan Johnson and his don't die philosophy. This is what I've learned today from this deep conversation with Nikos, who attended the summit. And there's summits all over the world. I would go online and check to see if the summit is coming to your city. I noticed that it was in Singapore. It's all over the States. I believe it's in Hong Kong. it's making its way to Asia. So this guy's basically like, what's he saying? I'm not playing by the rules. Everyone else follows, right? He's throwing millions into hacking his body like it's a tech startup and pushing the boundaries on what it means to age or not age. And here's the kicker. Whether you're trying to optimize your health, crush it in business, or just be better at life, the lesson from Bryan is simple. You don't have to follow the script. You can write your own rules, chase crazy goals, and do things people might think are impossible. Now, maybe you're not injecting plasma or, tracking every micro movement you make. That's fine. But you can start small. What's one thing you can tweak this week to level up your health? Maybe get more sleep, fix your diet, maybe hydrate like a pro. Whatever it is, just make that one small move. Remember, it's not about overnight change. It's about tracking small wins day after day that build into something massive. So here's my challenge. Here's our challenge for you. What's one thing that you're going to change this week to take control of your health? Doesn't need to be huge, just one tweak. All right, that's a wrap for today. If this hit home for you, do us a favor, leave us a review, share it with a friend who's into big ideas. And remember, keep questioning the default. We'll catch you in the next one.
And don't die.
And don't die.
Thank you for tuning in to Emergence Now, where we explore the emerging trends, technologies, and ideas that are shaping our world today for you to discover yourself. We hope you enjoyed this episode and gained valuable insights that you can apply in your own life. If you want to stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media, where we share additional content, engage with our community, and keep the conversation going. Thanks again for listening to Emergence Now, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode.